My name is Alison Carter, and at 32, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until the day before my brother Jake's wedding. I had spent weeks preparing my maid of honor dress, writing the perfect toast, and wrapping a thoughtful gift. When I mentioned my excitement for tomorrow's ceremony, my Aunt Barbara gave me a strange look and said, "It was last week," before showing me the wedding album filled with smiling family photos. Photos without me. If you think that hurt, wait until you hear what I did when they called about their renovation payments. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most clearly. This story might just change how you think about family obligations forever. Jake and I grew up in a modest suburban home in Boston with 4 years between us. Despite the age gap, we were inseparable during our childhood. I still remember teaching him to ride his blue bicycle without training wheels when he was 6, holding the back of his seat and running alongside until he pedaled away confidently. I taught him to swim in our community pool, patiently waiting in the shallow end while he dog-paddled toward me with determination in his eyes. When neighborhood bullies targeted him in 3rd grade, I confronted them despite being a quiet middle schooler myself. We developed our own secret language, with hand signals and code words that confused our parents but bonded us in our private world. Family vacations to Cape Cod featured us building elaborate sand castles and hunting for seashells together, always returning with pockets full of treasures and memories. Our parents, Martha and Richard, loved us both but showed a subtle favoritism toward Jake that became more apparent as years passed. Dad never missed Jake's baseball games, cheering loudly from the bleachers and taking him for celebratory ice cream afterward. Yet he frequently had important meetings during my debate, team finals, or chorus performances. I learned not to expect him in the audience, focusing instead on my achievements rather than his empty seat. Mom made elaborate birthday celebrations for Jake with themed cakes and invited the whole neighborhood, while my birthdays were acknowledged with simple store-bought cakes and small family gatherings. "You're too mature for all that fuss," she would say, as if my desire for equal treatment was childish. The praise distribution in our household followed predictable patterns. Jake received constant admiration for his personality, his charm, his social ease. "He lights up any room," our parents would tell relatives. I received acknowledgement only for tangible achievements. Report cards with straight A's, scholarships, awards. "Alison is our achiever," they would say, reducing me to my accomplishments rather than valuing me as a person. Constant comparisons became the backdrop of my adolescence, with innocent-seeming comments like, "Why can't you be easygoing like your brother?" Or "Jake would help" without being asked that steadily eroded my sense of inherent worth. These dynamics fueled my determination to succeed independently. I worked weekends at a local bookstore throughout high school, while maintaining my place on the honor roll. During college, I juggled 2 part-time jobs, sometimes sleeping only 4 hours between shifts and classes. My effort paid off with academic scholarships that covered most of my tuition at Boston University. I graduated with honors in marketing and landed an entry-level position at a respected firm where I advanced quickly through pure determination. By 28, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small but stylish condo in downtown Boston, an achievement my parents acknowledged with surprising ambivalence. Despite the uneven emotional terrain of our family, I remained generous with my resources. When my parents faced financial difficulties during Jake's college years, I stepped in to pay a significant portion of his tuition. "Just until we're back on our feet," Dad promised, though repayment was never mentioned again. During my early career, when my own budget was tight, I still managed to help my parents replace their failing refrigerator and water heater. Birthdays and holidays saw me giving thoughtful, often expensive gifts while receiving token items in return. I became the responsible one they turned to for help with technical problems, financial advice, and practical support, a role I accepted in hopes of finally earning the emotional recognition I craved. Our extended family followed my parents' lead in their treatment of me. Aunt Barbara, Mom's younger sister, specialized in subtle undermining comments disguised as concern. "Still no serious boyfriend, Alison? Well, career women often struggle with relationships," she would say at family gatherings, ignoring my accomplishments to focus on perceived deficiencies. My future sister-in-law, Megan, initially sought my friendship when she and Jake started dating 3 years ago. We had several enjoyable shopping trips and coffee dates where she seemed genuinely interested in knowing me. As their relationship progressed, however, she gradually aligned herself with my parents' perspective, canceling our plans with increasing frequency and adopting their dismissive attitude toward my achievements. Jake met Megan at our cousin's wedding, where their immediate chemistry was evident to everyone watching them on the dance floor. She worked as a pediatric nurse, her gentle nature and patient demeanor a good match for Jake's energetic personality. In the beginning, Megan made efforts to include me in their relationship, inviting me to dinner or movie nights. Our initial friendship seemed promising as we discovered shared interests in travel and photography. Over time, though, the invitations dwindled, and Megan began to echo my mother's subtle criticisms about my work hours and independent lifestyle. The cooling of our friendship coincided with her growing closeness to my mother, the two of them frequently shopping and lunching together, without extending invitations to me. The engagement announcement came last Christmas Eve during our family dinner. Jake proposed with a modest diamond ring, dropping to one knee beside the decorated tree while we all watched. My genuine happiness for my brother mingled with a familiar pang of exclusion when I learned that my parents had helped him select the ring months earlier. Everyone had known this moment was coming except me. Still, I pushed aside the hurt and focused on celebrating my brother's happiness, offering to help with wedding plans and expressing excitement about welcoming Megan officially into our family. Little did I know that this pattern of exclusion was about to reach an unprecedented level. The timeline of wedding preparations began in January. Shortly after the engagement, Jake and Megan announced they wanted a summer wedding, preferably in June when the weather in Massachusetts would be ideal. I immediately texted Jake asking about potential venues and dates, excited to block time off work and possibly help with arrangements. His response was vague, still figuring out details. We'll let you know soon. Throughout February, my attempts to get specific information were met with similarly evasive responses from both Jake and our parents. Mom would only say it will be a summer wedding when pressed, changing the subject before I could ask follow-up questions. My texts about venues and dates frequently went unanswered, or received delayed responses that provided no actual information. I made multiple attempts to be included in the wedding planning process. In early March, I offered to host a bridal shower for Megan, thinking it would be a perfect way to rebuild our fading friendship. "That's sweet of you," Megan replied, "but my sister and mother already have it planned." When I suggested several beautiful venues based on my marketing contacts in the city, my recommendations were dismissed without consideration. "We're looking for something more personal," was the vague explanation. I volunteered to handle the wedding favors, the ceremony programs, even the seating arrangements, but was consistently told these tasks were already taken care of. The pattern became unmistakable when I learned through a casual comment from my cousin that Megan had already chosen her bridesmaids. The complete absence of my name from the list was explained away as Megan only wanting sisters and childhood friends in the wedding party. Family interactions grew increasingly strange whenever the wedding was mentioned. Conversations would halt abruptly when I entered a room, resuming with obvious subject changes. When I asked specific questions about wedding details, family members would exchange quick glances before providing non-answers. At a family dinner in March, I overheard Mom and Aunt Barbara discussing flower arrangements, but they immediately stopped talking when I approached to refill my water glass. Dad became unusually interested in his phone whenever I brought up the wedding, while Jake developed a habit of suddenly remembering urgent tasks that required him to leave the room. These behaviors created a growing sense of unease that I tried to rationalize away, unwilling to confront the possibility of deliberate exclusion. In April, Mom suggested a mother-daughter lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown. I arrived hopeful that this might be an opportunity to finally discuss my role in the upcoming wedding. Throughout the meal, however, Mom remained distracted, checking her phone repeatedly and offering only superficial conversation. When I directly asked about wedding details, her answers remained frustratingly vague. "We're still figuring things out," she said, examining the dessert menu with unwarranted intensity. "You know how these things are. always changing until the last minute. Before I could press further, she redirected the conversation to critique my recent haircut and question my work hours. "Don't you think you're focusing too much on your career?" she asked, effectively shutting down my wedding inquiries. I left the restaurant with more questions than answers, and a growing suspicion that something wasn't right. My suspicions intensified when I discovered pre-wedding events through social media posts. A casual scroll through Instagram revealed photos of Jake's bachelor weekend in Vermont, complete with hiking and brewery tours. My cousins and uncles appeared in several pictures, all clearly having a wonderful time at an event I hadn't even known was happening. In another post, I spotted several female relatives at what appeared to be a bridal shower, surrounded by gifts and decorative bridal-themed balloons. When confronted about these events, Jake offered the weak excuse that certain pre-wedding celebrations were just for certain people and suggested I was being overly sensitive. "Not everything is about you, Alison," he said dismissively, the brother who once shared secret codes with me now treating me like an unreasonable acquaintance. Despite these concerning signs, I proceeded with my preparations for the wedding I believed was approaching. I requested time off work for the week before the supposed ceremony, wanting to be fully available for any last-minute tasks. I purchased an expensive crystal serving set from their registry, alongside a personally crafted photo album documenting Jake and Megan's relationship, including several pictures from our early group outings before Megan and I grew apart. My carefully selected dusty blue dress required minor alterations to fit perfectly, a process I rushed through with a local tailor at premium pricing. I scheduled hair and makeup appointments for what I believed was the wedding day, splurging on packages that included trials to ensure everything would be perfect. Between moments of doubt and confusion, I wrote and rehearsed a heartfelt toast celebrating my brother's journey and welcoming Megan to our family, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror until I could deliver it without emotional stumbles. The day before what I believed was the wedding arrived with clear skies and mild June weather. I completed my final preparations with genuine excitement, pushing aside lingering concerns about the strange family behavior. My dress hung pressed and ready on my bedroom door. My gift was beautifully wrapped with silver paper and blue ribbon, and my toast was memorized. I made one last attempt to confirm details, calling Mom's cell phone but getting her voicemail. Dad didn't answer his phone either, and Jake's went straight to voicemail. Slightly concerned but still optimistic, I decided to drive to my parents' home, assuming they would be busy with last-minute wedding arrangements and could use an extra pair of hands. The 20-minute drive was filled with happy anticipation and wedding day music playing through my car speakers. I had no idea I was driving toward one of the most painful revelations of my life. I arrived at my parents' colonial-style home around 2 p.m, immediately noticing the unusual quiet. Typically, before family events, their house buzzed with activity, phone calls, last-minute errands, and the general chaos of preparation. Today, however, the driveway contained only their 2 cars, and no sounds emerged from the open windows. I let myself in with my spare key, calling out a cheerful greeting that echoed through the surprisingly orderly living room. Mom appeared from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, her expression shifting from surprise to something resembling alarm when she saw me. "Alison, we weren't expecting you," she said, her voice higher than normal. Dad entered from his study, exchanging a quick glance with Mom before offering an awkward hello. Neither moved to hug me or explain the conspicuous absence of wedding preparation. The silence that settled in the living room felt heavy with unspoken words, the air thick with discomfort. I stood with my purse still on my shoulder, increasingly aware that something was fundamentally wrong but unable to identify exactly what. Aunt Barbara emerged from the guest bathroom, her eyebrows rising at the sight of me standing in the entryway. Unlike my parents, who seemed frozen in uncomfortable silence, Barbara approached with her usual confident stride, head tilted in apparent confusion. "Why are you all dressed up, Alison?" she asked, noting my carefully styled hair and makeup. "Looking for wedding leftovers?" The casual cruelty of her tone suggested a joke I wasn't privy to, amplifying my growing disorientation. When I mentioned my excitement for tomorrow's ceremony, Her expression shifted to something between amusement and pity. "The wedding?" she repeated, looking toward my parents who remained uncharacteristically silent. "It was last week, dear. The Saturday before last." Without waiting for my response, she walked to the coffee table and retrieved a leather-bound album I hadn't noticed. The photographs just arrived yesterday. "They did a beautiful job, didn't they?" She opened the album and held it toward me, displaying a professional wedding photo of Jake and Megan surrounded by my entire family, dated the previous weekend. The physical shock hit me like a wave, starting as a coldness in my fingertips that rushed upward until my entire body felt numb. The album contained dozens of professional photographs, documenting a wedding I knew nothing about. There was Jake in a charcoal gray tuxedo, standing beneath a flower-adorned arbor I had never seen. Megan looked radiant in a lace gown with a sweetheart neckline, nothing like the dress styles she had casually discussed with me months earlier. The venue was a rustic vineyard setting with mountain views, completely different from the city venues they had supposedly been considering. Each turn of the page revealed another aspect of the elaborate celebration I had been excluded from. A rehearsal dinner with extended family members seated at a long table adorned with candles and flowers. The ceremony with rows of white chairs filled with familiar faces of aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. A reception with dancing, cake cutting, toasts with raised champagne glasses. My parents featured prominently, Mom in a formal navy dress, Dad looking uncomfortable but present in his best suit. Even distant relatives from California appeared in group shots, having apparently made the cross-country journey for an event I wasn't told was happening. Multiple events spanning several days. An entire wedding week that had occurred while I continued preparing for a ceremony that had already passed. My stunned silence was broken by the sound of the front door opening. Jake and Megan entered, shopping bags in hand, their casual Saturday demeanor shifting to visible discomfort when they spotted me standing in the living room. Jake's eyes darted to the open photo album in my hands, then to our parents, before settling back on me with an unconvincing smile. "Hey, sis," he said, his voice unnaturally bright. "What brings you by?" The absurdity of his casual greeting in the face of what lay exposed in my hands left me momentarily speechless. When I finally found my voice, it emerged as a whisper. "The wedding was last week?" The question hung in the air as Jake and Megan exchanged glances with my parents. It was Jake who finally responded, his tone suggesting confusion that I would even need to ask. "Didn't we tell you? I could have sworn someone told you we moved the date." He looked to our parents for confirmation, a practiced move that suggested this response had been prepared. Mom nodded quickly, too quickly, adding, "I'm sure I mentioned it during our lunch." Dad simply stared at the floor, his discomfort evident in his rigid posture. Megan stood slightly behind Jake, her expression carefully neutral but failing to hide a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. The collective attempt to gaslight me was so blatant, it momentarily overshadowed the pain of exclusion. They were not only admitting to having the wedding without me, but trying to convince me it was due to a miscommunication rather than deliberate exclusion. The coordinated nature of their response suggested this wasn't a mistake, but a planned decision they had prepared to defend. "You're telling me," I said, my voice gaining strength despite the trembling in my hands, "that my only brother got married last week, and no one bothered to make sure I knew the correct date?" I looked from face to face, searching for any sign of genuine remorse or explanation. How was that possible unless it was intentional? Jake shifted uncomfortably, avoiding direct eye contact. There was a lot going on. Things were hectic. We changed venues last minute and had to adjust the date. It was just a miscommunication. His explanation rang hollow, contradicted by the evidence of carefully planned events in the photos I still held. "Last minute?" I echoed, flipping through pages showing elaborate decorations and coordinated attire. "This doesn't look last minute. This looks planned weeks, if not months in advance." Mom interjected, her tone suggesting I was making an unnecessary scene. "Alison, you must have forgotten. You're always so busy with work. Maybe you just didn't write it down correctly." The suggestion that my exclusion from my brother's wedding was somehow my fault added insult to injury. Dad finally spoke, his dismissive words perhaps the most hurtful of all. "It's not a big deal. You were busy anyway. You probably couldn't have made it with your work schedule." The casual invalidation of what should have been one of the most important family events cut deeply, confirming that my presence had been deemed unnecessary, an afterthought not worth ensuring. Aunt Barbara chose this moment to add her particular brand of cruelty, patting my arm with false sympathy. Well, it turned out perfectly without any drama, so maybe it worked out for the best. The implication was clear. My absence was considered a positive factor in the wedding's success. The barely disguised hostility beneath her concerned expression suggested a narrative had been constructed within the family where I was cast as a potential problem to be avoided rather than a sister to be included. The physical impact of this revelation manifested as the room began to spin slightly, reality shifting beneath my feet. I found myself gripping the back of a chair for support, fighting to maintain some semblance of composure, while my entire understanding of my place in the family collapsed around me. The initial shock was giving way to a pain so acute it felt physical, a crushing pressure in my chest, making it difficult to breathe normally. Yet within the devastating clarity of that moment, something else was emerging, a recognition that would eventually lead to necessary change, though I couldn't see it yet through the fog of betrayal. I don't remember much about leaving my parents' house. The walk to the door exists in my memory as a silent movie, faces watching without speaking, as I placed the wedding album on the coffee table with shaking hands and turned away. No one followed me outside. No one called after me with explanations or apologies. The absence of any effort to repair the damage spoke volumes about my true position in the family hierarchy, a truth I had been avoiding for years. The drive home became impossible less than a mile away, when tears blurred my vision so completely that continuing would have been dangerous. I pulled into a small park where Jake and I had played as children, parking beneath a maple tree that offered some privacy from passing cars. There, alone in the safety of my car, I allowed the dam to break. The sound that emerged was primal, a wounded animal cry that came from somewhere deep and untouched before this moment. I screamed until my throat hurt, pounded the steering wheel until my palms stung, and sobbed until no more tears would come. Only then, emptied of that first wave of raw emotion, did I drive the remaining distance home. The weekend passed in alternating states of numbness and overwhelming grief. I ignored calls from work colleagues, inquiring about Monday's client meeting, silenced notifications from friends asking about weekend plans. Food held no appeal, and sleep came only in brief, exhausted intervals between bouts of replaying every interaction leading up to this betrayal. The wrapped wedding gift sat on my dining table like a mockery, the silver paper catching light from my apartment windows. My carefully altered dress hung in the closet, tags still attached, a physical reminder of my naivety in believing I mattered enough to be included in my brother's milestone moment. Sunday afternoon brought a new dimension of pain through social media discoveries. In a moment of masochistic curiosity, I searched for wedding hashtags with Jake and Megan's names, finding an extensive collection of posts from the celebration. The wedding hadn't been a simple weekend event, but a week-long celebration beginning with a Thursday rehearsal dinner attended by over 50 guests, including relatives from across the country. Photos of Megan's bachelorette party revealed several of my female cousins had been included, women I had grown up alongside and considered friends. Even more hurtful were comments from family friends, expressing surprise at my absence. "Miss seeing you there," and "Where was Alison?" scattered throughout the posts. These innocent questions confirmed that my exclusion had been noticed, requiring explanations I could only imagine my family providing. The deeper pain came with the realization that this wasn't a mistake or oversight, but a deliberate, coordinated decision. The logistics of keeping me in the dark about an event of this magnitude required effort and planning. Phone calls to ensure guests didn't mention the correct date to me, careful management of social media posts until after the fact, orchestrated vagueness when I asked direct questions. Family members had been enlisted in this deception, creating a conspiracy of silence that must have required explicit instructions. The level of commitment to excluding me suggested a family consensus that I was somehow unworthy of inclusion in this significant event. This understanding forced me to reconsider years of family dynamics through a new lens. The birthday checks I'd sent to nieces and nephews, the Christmas gifts carefully selected for each family member, the financial support provided during hardships, all while being emotionally sidelined. I had been fulfilling my familial obligations with increasing generosity while receiving diminishing emotional returns, a one-sided arrangement I had accepted in hopes of eventually earning full acceptance. The wedding exclusion wasn't an anomaly, but the culmination of a pattern so long-standing I had normalized it. The physical manifestations of this grief affected my professional life for the first time in my career. Monday morning found me calling in sick, something I hadn't done since starting at my firm 4 years earlier. My boss expressed concern at the hoarseness in my voice, assuming a severe cold rather than the aftermath of grief-induced screaming. I lost 7 pounds that week from simply forgetting to eat, meals becoming optional rituals I performed mechanically when I remembered. Sleep continued to elude me, leading to exhaustion that made focus impossible. Most alarming were the panic attacks that struck without warning, heart racing and breathing constricted whenever my thoughts turned toward family interactions. With painful clarity, I began revisiting past family dynamics, identifying patterns I had previously excused. There was the graduation party my parents had scheduled during my important work presentation despite having my calendar information months in advance. The family vacation planned without consulting me, followed by expressions of disappointment when I couldn't rearrange work commitments on 2 days' notice. Holiday gatherings where my career achievements were acknowledged briefly, before extended discussions of Jake's most minor accomplishments. The consistent expectation that I would adjust my schedule to accommodate everyone else, while my time constraints were treated as evidence of misplaced priorities. Most illuminating was the pattern of being valued for my resources, while being emotionally sidelined. I had become the family bank and problem solver, expected to provide financial assistance, technical support, and practical help, while my emotional needs remained unaddressed. The wedding exclusion simply brought this dynamic into sharp relief, making it impossible to maintain the comfortable illusion that these were merely oversight or miscommunications. This was the breaking point that would ultimately force a long overdue reassessment of my role in the family system. 6 months before the wedding debacle, I had initiated what I believed would be a meaningful gift to my parents. For years, they had complained about their aging home, with its leaking roof, drafty windows, and outdated kitchen that Mom called a relic from the 70s. Their financial mismanagement was a family open secret, with credit card debt and poor investment decisions leaving them cash-strapped despite Dad's decent income as an insurance adjuster. Home repairs had been deferred so long that major systems were beginning to fail, yet they lacked the savings to address even the most urgent issues. During a Sunday dinner in January, as Mom described water damage from the latest roof leak, I made an impulsive but heartfelt offer. "I want to help you renovate," I said, the words spilling out before I'd fully considered the financial implications. "Not just patches and repairs, but a complete update to make this house comfortable for your retirement years." The surprised delight on their faces had seemed genuine, Mom's eyes filling with tears as Dad squeezed my shoulder in a rare display of physical affection. That moment of apparent appreciation had felt like validation, a sign that my contribution to the family was finally being recognized. Now I understood it differently. The financial arrangement was substantial and carefully structured. I had outlined a $175,000 budget for a complete home renovation, including a new roof, replacement windows, kitchen modernization, bathroom updates, and extensive interior improvements. Working with a contractor recommended by a colleague, I established a monthly payment schedule spread across 12 months to make the financial impact manageable alongside my mortgage and other obligations. The first installment of $60,000 covered the initial phase, with materials purchased and preliminary work completed over the past 3 months. All contracts listed me as the financier, with my signature required for major decisions and change orders. Making this commitment had required significant personal sacrifice. I had postponed my plans for an advanced degree, delayed upgrading my aging car, and substantially reduced my retirement contributions. Weekend brunches with friends became rare indulgences rather than regular social fixtures. My vacation plans downsized from European exploration to a weekend at a nearby lake. These sacrifices had seemed worthwhile for the dual rewards of improving my parents' living situation and cementing my place in the family through tangible contribution. The irony of making these sacrifices while being excluded from my brother's wedding was not lost on me. The renovation had progressed significantly before the wedding revelation. A new architectural shingle roof had replaced the leaking original, with proper ventilation and insulation that immediately improved the home's energy efficiency. High-quality vinyl windows had been installed throughout, eliminating drafts and reducing outside noise. The kitchen demolition was underway, with dated oak cabinets removed and plumbing repositioned for the new layout. Pallets of materials for the bathroom remodels stood covered in the garage, including marble tile, modern fixtures, and custom vanities. Structural improvements to address sagging floor joists were scheduled to begin the following week, requiring specialized equipment and expertise. The contractors provided regular updates directly to me, sharing progress photos and detailed reports. Their professionalism and transparency had made the significant investment feel secure, with each improvement visibly enhancing my childhood home. The project manager, Dave, had mentioned several times how lucky my parents were to have such a generous daughter. Comments that had filled me with pride before the wedding revelation, but now carried a different emotional resonance. 3 weeks after discovering I had been excluded from Jake's wedding, I sat at my desk staring at an email notification for the next scheduled payment of $20,000 due to the contractors. The payment would fund the kitchen cabinet installation and countertop fabrication, significant visual improvements my parents had expressed particular excitement about. My finger hovered over the approve button, muscle memory nearly completing the transaction automatically before conscious thought intervened. In that moment, flashbacks of the wedding photos without me scrolled through my mind like a painful slideshow. I saw again the coordinated family outfits, the celebration spanning days, the deliberate exclusion, masked as miscommunication. The dissonance between my financial generosity and my emotional exclusion from the family became impossible to ignore. Was I funding luxury renovations for people who couldn't be bothered to include me in landmark family events? The question answered itself, my finger moving away from the approve button to instead compose an email to the project manager requesting a temporary hold on all work. The relief that followed this decision surprised me, immediate and physical, like the lifting of a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. Guilt mingled with the relief, concerns about disappointing the contractors, and leaving my parents with a partially completed home. Yet these concerns were overshadowed by the recognition that I was enforcing long overdue boundaries, refusing to continue a pattern of financial giving without emotional reciprocity. The simple email to Dave explaining that funding was temporarily suspended pending family discussions felt like the first authentic act of self-respect I had undertaken in years. My approach to the situation remained professional despite the personal nature of the conflict. I arranged a call with Dave to explain that work would need to pause temporarily, apologizing for any inconvenience to his schedule and crew. His response was more understanding than I had anticipated, mentioning that payment pauses were not uncommon in large residential projects, and assuring me that the site would be properly secured during the hiatus. I requested a detailed accounting of work completed and materials purchased, wanting clear documentation of how the initial $60,000 had been allocated. Dave promised to provide this within the week, his professionalism unchanged by the financial uncertainty. The contractors secured the property conscientiously, covering exposed areas against potential weather damage and ensuring all electrical and plumbing modifications were safe during the pause. Materials already on site were properly stored and inventoried, with photos sent to document their condition and location. The half-demolished kitchen was left in a state that, while not functional, was at least stable and weather-protected. These precautions addressed my practical concerns about the property, while I navigated the more complex emotional landscape of family expectations. 2 weeks passed without contact from my family regarding either the wedding situation or the renovation pause. No one called to check on my emotional well-being after the wedding revelation. No messages acknowledging my hurt feelings or offering explanations beyond the initial inadequate excuses. The telling absence of concern confirmed that my emotional state was secondary to practical considerations in our family dynamic. They had excluded me from a major life event without apparent remorse, yet expected the financial support to continue uninterrupted. A one-sided arrangement I could no longer sustain. The angry phone call came on a Tuesday evening, exactly 17 days after my discovery of the wedding deception and 2 weeks after I had suspended renovation payments. I was reviewing client proposals when Mom's name appeared on my phone screen, the first contact from any family member since I had walked out of their house. Her voice greeted me with none of the tentative reconciliation I might have hoped for, instead launching immediately into indignation. "The contractors called your father today," she began without preamble, her tone shrill with accusation. "They said you've stopped payments and put the entire project on hold. We have a house torn apart, Alison. How could you do this without discussing it with us first?" In the background, I could hear Dad's voice, the words indistinct but the angry tone unmistakable. Their focus exclusively on the renovation, with no acknowledgement of the wedding situation, spoke volumes about their priorities. "I need to make some financial adjustments," I replied, keeping my voice deliberately calm despite the rapid acceleration of my heart rate. "I should have discussed it with you, just like you should have discussed the wedding date change with me." The parallel was intentional, a gentle but clear reminder of their far more significant failure to communicate. Mom ignored the reference entirely, continuing as if I hadn't spoken. "Your father is furious. We have exposed wiring in the kitchen. Half the cabinets are missing, and we can't even cook a proper meal. What are we supposed to do?" The absence of any concern for my feelings continued to confirm the transactional nature of our relationship. I was valued for what I could provide, not who I was to them. "I'm going to add Jake to this call," Mom announced suddenly. Before I could object, the line clicked, and Jake's voice joined the conversation, his tone immediately condescending, as if addressing a misbehaving child rather than his older sister. "Alison, what are you doing?" he demanded. "Mom and Dad say you've abandoned the renovation project halfway through. That's not how responsible adults handle things." The irony of being lectured about responsibility by someone who had excluded me from his wedding was almost laughable. I could hear Megan in the background, her voice a murmuring presence clearly coaching Jake's responses. "I made a financial commitment based on certain assumptions about my place in this family," I responded, surprising myself with the steady clarity in my voice. "Recent events have caused me to reassess those assumptions." "This is about the wedding, isn't it?" Jake asked, his tone suggesting my hurt feelings were a trivial matter compared to the renovation crisis. "You're punishing Mom and Dad because you're upset about a miscommunication. That's incredibly petty, Alison." The coordinated attack continued, with each family member contributing their particular brand of manipulation. Dad joined on another extension, his voice gruff with barely contained anger. "Your mother and I are living in a construction zone because of your tantrum. The neighbors are asking questions about why work has stopped. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" Mom added emotional leverage, her voice breaking in what I now recognized as performative distress. "I can't even have my bridge club over. We're washing dishes in the bathroom sink like we're camping. I never thought my own daughter would put us in this position." The calculated nature of their approach was becoming increasingly transparent, each playing assigned roles to maximize pressure without addressing the underlying issue. Jake escalated with threats about family standing. "If you don't restart these payments immediately, you need to understand what this means for your place in this family. Some things can't be undone, Alison. The attempt at intimidation might have worked months earlier, but the wedding exclusion had already shown me exactly what my place in this family truly was." Throughout their coordinated offensive, I remained silent, allowing them to exhaust their prepared arguments. When the litany of complaints finally paused, I took a deep breath and delivered the response I had been formulating since the payment pause. "Didn't I tell you I was stopping the payments?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. I could have sworn I told someone. The deliberate echo of their wedding excuse hung in the air, creating a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. In that silence, I felt a shift in the power dynamic, that had defined our relationship for decades. "This isn't a game, Alison," Jake finally sputtered, but the confident condescension had evaporated from his tone. "No, it isn't," I agreed. "Games are fun and everyone knows the rules. What happened with the wedding wasn't a game or a miscommunication. It was a deliberate choice to exclude me from one of the most important family events possible. And now you're all upset because there are consequences to that choice." The calculated calm in my voice seemed to unnerve them more than anger would have. They had prepared for defensiveness, for tears, for apologies, not for this composed articulation of the fundamental problem. Their response was immediate escalation, Jake's voice rising as he abandoned pretense. "You're ruining everything as usual," he shouted. "This is exactly why we didn't want you at the wedding. Everything always has to be about you and your feelings." The accidental admission confirmed what I had already concluded, that my exclusion had been intentional rather than accidental. Mom gasped at Jake's indiscretion before attempting damage control. "That's not what he meant," she insisted, her voice strained. "Jake is just upset. We all wanted you there, of course we did." There was just so much happening, and we knew how busy you are with work. The transparent attempt to reframe Jake's honest outburst only highlighted the family's commitment to maintaining appearances rather than addressing reality. Dad's approach shifted to ultimatums, his voice grave with implied threat. "You need to think very carefully about what you're doing, Alison. Family is forever, but if you continue this behavior, you may find yourself cut off from this family. Is that what you want?" The irony of being threatened with exclusion after being so thoroughly excluded from Jake's wedding wasn't lost on me. The threat that might once have terrified me now seemed almost redundant. "I think I've already experienced being cut off from this family," I replied quietly. "The difference is that I'm choosing it now rather than having it done to me." With newfound clarity, I outlined the boundaries that would govern our relationship moving forward. "Relationships require mutual respect," I explained, keeping my tone even despite the emotional weight of the conversation. "I've been willing to be the family bank while being emotionally discarded, but that arrangement is over. The trust between us has been broken, and it can't be repaired with demands and threats." I laid out clear terms for moving forward. If you want the renovation to continue, we need to address what happened with the wedding first. That starts with a sincere acknowledgement that my exclusion was deliberate and hurtful, not a miscommunication. I need accountability before financial support resumes. The simplicity of this requirement highlighted how low the bar had been set, asking merely for honesty rather than elaborate amends. My family's response to these reasonable terms revealed how entrenched the dysfunctional patterns had become. Rather than recognizing an opportunity for authentic reconciliation, they escalated with increasingly desperate tactics. Mom cycled between tears and accusations. Dad issued additional threats about family legacy, and Jake repeatedly referenced my history of overreaction as justification for my exclusion from his wedding. Their unified resistance to basic accountability confirmed that the renovation payments had been suspended for valid reasons. When the circular arguments showed no sign of resolution, I made the decision to end the call on my terms. "I need to go now. I've explained my position, and the next steps are up to you. I hope you'll choose honesty and repair, but I'll be okay either way." Before they could launch new objections, I ended the call, placing my phone on silent as it immediately began ringing again. The aftermath of this confrontation brought physical manifestations of stress, my hands shaking as adrenaline coursed through my system. Standing up to the established family dynamic had required more courage than any professional challenge I had faced, drawing on emotional resources I hadn't known I possessed. Despite the trembling in my limbs, a strange sense of peace settled over me, the peace of finally speaking truth after years of accommodation. That night brought the first truly restful sleep I had experienced since the wedding revelation, a dreamless slumber, unmarred by anxiety or hurt. The beginning of reclaiming my self-respect had an unexpected side effect: the ability to rest without the constant background noise of unmet emotional needs. The hours following the confrontation phone call brought a flurry of text messages from extended family members. my phone lighting up with opinions and judgments from relatives who had been silent witnesses to my exclusion from the wedding. Aunt Barbara led what appeared to be a coordinated campaign to portray me as selfish and ungrateful, messaging several cousins with a one-sided account of the situation that positioned me as punishing my parents over a simple miscommunication. After everything they've done for her, one message read, forwarded to me by a well-meaning cousin, "This is how she repays them." Not all responses were negative, however. Several younger cousins who had observed the family dynamics over years sent private messages of support. "I always thought it was weird how they treated you," wrote my cousin Emma. "What happened with the wedding was terrible, and I'm sorry I didn't say something at the time." These glimpses of validation from unexpected sources provided crucial emotional support during a period of intense family pressure. After 2 days of constant notifications, I made the decision to block the most toxic family members' numbers, creating necessary space for my healing process to begin. With the breathing room created by these boundaries, I began building a more authentic support system. I confided the full situation to 3 close friends during a weekend brunch, their shocked expressions confirming that my reaction wasn't overblown as my family had suggested. "That's not normal, Alison," my friend Tara insisted. "No one forgets to tell their sister about a wedding unless it's intentional." This straightforward validation helped counteract years of gaslighting about my emotional responses being excessive or unreasonable. These friends initiated healing activities, from weekend hiking trips to cooking classes, creating new positive experiences to balance the family trauma. 6 weeks after the confrontation, at Tara's suggestion, I joined a support group for adults from difficult family backgrounds. The weekly meetings introduced me to others navigating similar challenges, their stories both validating my experience and providing perspective on different approaches to boundary setting. One participant's comment particularly resonated: "Family should be the safest place, not the place that hurts you most consistently." This simple truth became a touchstone during moments of doubt, a reminder that my expectations for basic inclusion and respect had been reasonable all along. Professional support proved equally valuable in my healing journey. I began weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Marshall, a family systems specialist recommended by a colleague. Our work together helped identify the patterns that had defined my family relationships, particularly my tendency to give financially while accepting emotional crumbs in return. "You've been trying to purchase the love and acceptance that should have been freely given," she observed during an early session. "What would happen if you stopped making that payment?" This framing helped me recognize my people-pleasing tendencies, not just within my family, but across relationships, leading to healthier boundaries in friendships and dating. Through therapy, I gained crucial insights about financial manipulation and emotional abuse in family systems. I learned that my parents' dependence on my financial support while excluding me emotionally followed a recognized pattern of exploitation rather than normal family interdependence. Understanding these dynamics intellectually helped reduce the guilt I felt about suspending the renovation payments, reframing my decision as healthy boundary enforcement rather than retaliation. Dr. Marshall helped me develop strategies for maintaining these boundaries against the sophisticated manipulation tactics my family had perfected over decades. 6 months after the wedding revelation, my parents made their first attempt at reconciliation, though their motivation remained transparent. Mom called on a Sunday afternoon, her voice notably gentler than during our confrontation call. "We've been doing some thinking," she began cautiously, "and we may not have handled the wedding situation as well as we could have." This careful non-apology came just days after the contractor had contacted them about the extended work stoppage, potentially voiding some material warranties. The timing suggested financial concerns, rather than genuine remorse, motivated the outreach. Jake's attempt at accountability came via text message a week later. "Looking back, I can see how you might have felt excluded. I was probably wrong about some things." The qualified nature of this acknowledgement, with its strategic placement of might and probably, revealed a continued reluctance to take full responsibility. Still, it represented movement from his previous position of complete denial, a small step toward potential authentic relationship in the future. I maintained my position that resuming financial support required genuine accountability, not strategic half measures designed primarily to restart the renovation. I appreciate the outreach, I told my mother during a brief phone call, but healing our relationship needs to happen separately from discussions about money. When you're ready to talk honestly about the patterns that led to my exclusion from the wedding, I'm willing to listen. This clear separation between emotional reconciliation and financial arrangements helped prevent a return to the dysfunctional pattern of purchasing family connection through financial support. 1 year after the wedding incident, I attended a Thanksgiving gathering at my aunt's house, the first family event since establishing my boundaries. I entered on my terms, having declined my mother's request to bring 3 homemade pies and arrive early to help with preparation, traditionally my assigned role. Instead, I arrived at the scheduled time with a single store-bought dessert, a small but significant departure from my pattern of overgiving. The initial awkwardness gave way to a different dynamic as family members adjusted to my new boundaries, some with greater success than others. My parents showed signs of adapting to our revised relationship, though old patterns occasionally resurfaced. Dad refrained from financial complaints in my presence, a noticeable change from previous gatherings where my role as financial problem solver had been assumed. Mom made visible efforts to ask about my work without immediate criticism, though her questions still carried undertones of judgment about my priority choices. Jake and Megan maintained polite distance during the gathering, their discomfort with my newfound assertiveness evident in their minimal interaction. The most significant changes occurred in my personal growth rather than family dynamics. The professional confidence I had always possessed extended into my personal relationships, allowing me to set appropriate boundaries with friends and dating partners. I began a relationship with Daniel, a software engineer who demonstrated consistent respect for my time and emotional needs, a refreshing contrast to previous partners selected partly for their willingness to accommodate my family's intrusions. Learning to give appropriately without overextending became a practice applied across all relationships, creating more balanced connections based on mutual respect rather than people-pleasing. My chosen family expanded during this period of growth, with friendships deepening as I became more authentic in my interactions. Weekend hiking groups, book clubs, and volunteer commitments created community connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. These relationships, freely chosen and mutually nurturing, provided the emotional support my family of origin had withheld, proving that meaningful connection was possible without the painful price I had previously paid for family inclusion. Looking back from the perspective of 18 months after the wedding incident, I can recognize the painful gift hidden within that exclusion. Being so blatantly removed from a landmark family event created unavoidable clarity about my position within the family system, clarity I might have continued avoiding through smaller accommodations and explanations. The renovation payment pause, while initially motivated by hurt, became the mechanism for establishing long overdue boundaries that allowed healthier relationship patterns to develop. The most valuable lesson emerged from this painful experience. True family supports rather than exploits, celebrates rather than diminishes, includes rather than excludes. These qualities can exist in biological families, but they aren't guaranteed by shared DNA alone. The freedom that comes with self-respect has transformed my understanding of family obligation, replacing automatic compliance with thoughtful choices about where and how to invest my emotional and financial resources. While our relationship remains more limited than before, it now contains the possibility of authenticity previously absent beneath the surface harmony. The peace I've found comes not from family approval, but from knowing my worth isn't determined by others' treatment. I no longer measure my value through my usefulness to family members, or their willingness to include me in significant events. This independence has created space for genuine connection, based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial leverage. While the path to this understanding was painful, I remained grateful for the clarity that allowed me to build a life where belonging is freely given rather than constantly earned through sacrifice. Have you ever experienced being excluded from an important family event? How did you handle it? And what boundaries did you establish afterward? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about reclaiming your power in difficult family situations. Remember, sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I hope this story helps you recognize your own worth isn't determined by how others treat you.